the shadow of the Andes, Chile's capital city of Santiago greets President Eisenhower with overwhelming enthusiasm. In the crowds that lined the miles from the airport to the embassy, there were some few anti-American incidents, but the very size of the popular turnout indicated a triumph for Ike, coming as it did in the face of a call by the left-wing opposition party for a show of massive indifference. At the presidential palace, Ike conferred with Chile's chief of state, Jorge Alessandro Rodriguez. 2 days of private talks on hemisphere problems. In his public appearances, Ike made major progress in his mission, creating better understanding of United States acts and attitudes towards Latin America. Addressing a joint session of the Chilean Congress, Ike reviews in detail the United States' role in the hemisphere's economic development and goes on to support the plan of President Rodriguez to cut armaments in Latin America and use the funds saved for economic advancement in the shelter of Pan-American guarantees against aggression. Earlier, Ike impressed die-hard student radicals by taking time to answer an open letter attacking United States policy. Ike's visit to Chile sums up another remarkable success for his extraordinary personal diplomacy. Northward ho! The nuclear sub Spargo probes under the Arctic ice pack to the pole in the wake of her atomic sister ships. Her sail or conning tower pokes through at the North Pole itself, latitude 0, longitude 0. Oceanographic research is the Spargo's primary mission, but once there, the crew falls to affixing special cancellations on envelopes for hundreds of stamp collectors. The trip recorded by these Defense Department films gathered valuable new data on the still mysterious realm of the Arctic Sea. Some 2,700 miles and 15 days underwater to the top of the world. At the Royal Opera House, Covent Garden, London, Princess Margaret and Anthony Armstrong Jones make their first public appearance together since news of their engagement. A cheering throng, not especially interested in culture, lines the sidewalk. The announcement had come as a complete surprise, and the engaged couple get as much attention from the ballet goers inside. They accompanied the Queen Mother to a benefit performance. Cameramen get sympathetic cooperation from the groom-to-be, himself one of England's top photographers by profession. There is a popular ovation from the orchestra for the radiant princess and her fiancé. Ample indication that all Britain shares not only surprise at its favorite princess's engagement, but pleasure and delight. One of the ballet's greatest stars is on stage, but the spotlight is definitely on the royal box. Spring fashion collection of the House of Dior, brightening the view, while outside, winter's farewell gusts are felt. Designer Yves Saint Laurent this year agrees with his fellow couturiers of Paris that the big sleeve is passé. He is for gathered skirts and for very elegant lounging slacks, or toreadors, call them what you will. The waists are higher, the skirts are fuller, and the colors gayer than in many a year. All in all, a pretty picture for Paris. At Fort Dix, New Jersey, Sergeant Elvis Presley is mustered out after 2 years of Army service. The rock and roll idol of millions is back on the scene. Among his greeters, Nancy Sinatra, daughter of another well-known vocalist. Elvis is glad as can be to be back and eager to start singing. He's also nearly interested in becoming a serious actor. The Army's loss may be the drama's gain. Who knows? The American League champions Chicago White Sox charge on field at Sarasota. Losers in the last World Series to the Dodgers, they'd like to go, go, go all the way this year. Louis Aparicio to Nellie Fox makes the double play. Powerful Ted Kluszewski holds down first base. Manager Al Lopez and part owner Hank Greenberg watch the mound staff limbering up. Southpaw Billy Pierce. Old reliable early win. Turned 40 this year. Sharpening up batting reflexes, Sherm Lawler. Al Smith. And Big Clue, a strong factor in White Sox dreams of glory. At Vero Beach, the Dodgers aim to keep the Diamond Crown. Under manager Walt Alston's eagle eye, they're hard at work ironing out those winter kinks. Don Drysdale, a 17-game winner in '59. Johnny Podres, Los Angeles stalwart southpaw. Larry Sherry, one-man sensation of the World Series. Plenty of mound strength and an effective infield. New at first base, rookie Frank Howard, already eyed as a star. Behind the plate, John Roseboro. Dodgers haven't got the batting power they once did, but the roster is dangerous. Old-timer Duke Snider, still a tower of strength. And Charlie Neal, an effective hitter. Hitter Rip Rapolsky and Wally Moon, pacemakers for 1960. Was threatened by the most critical period in history since the end of the war. Red puppet Castro and the Russians turned Cuba into an island fortress, and U.S. planes spotted missile installations aimed at key points in the Western Hemisphere. The planes brought back evidence that moved the Organization of American States and the Western Allies to back President Kennedy unanimously when he declared an arms blockade of Cuba and laid down an ultimatum.
To halt this offensive buildup, a strict quarantine on all offensive military equipment under shipment to Cuba is being initiated. All ships of any kind bound for Cuba, from whatever nation or port, were they found to contain cargoes of offensive weapons, be turned back.
In the face of U.S. determination, the Soviets dismantled their missiles and bombers and shipped them home. It was the retreat to Moscow. The democracies had served notice on the Russians that any aggressive threat in the Western Hemisphere would not be tolerated. The Wall of Shame in Berlin was 1 year old. It was in 1961 that East German communists, appalled at the numbers who were fleeing to the West, threw up the wall. The Reds were constantly at work reinforcing the wall, but still people fled to the West. Some were successful, some were not. The civilized world cried shame when East German guards shot a fleeing teenager and then left him to die. They removed his body, but they will never remove him as a symbol to the angered Germans. They vented their wrath on buses carrying Russian guards to a Soviet war memorial and turned to the West Berlin Freedom Bell to voice their unity as a people. The Allies continued to stand firm in Berlin, and the Germans made a national hero of U.S. General Lucius Clay, who continued to be a leading spokesman for German freedom. France was at peace for the first time since 1939, as President Charles de Gaulle's government brought the war to an end in Algeria. It was the end of nearly 8 years of bloodshed, and the African nation won its freedom after 132 years of rule. The man who emerged as strongman was Vice Premier Ben Bella, a leftist who soon found himself beset with a score of problems. He had to turn to France for help as the new nation faced an economic collapse. India found the path of neutralism a hard one in a world torn by strife. Red China poured troops over her northern frontier, and India's people mobilized to meet the threat. India had been ill-prepared to defend herself, and Defense Minister Krishna Menon was deposed. The people donated their jewelry and life savings to the defense effort as their government sought aid. The West responded quickly to Prime Minister Nehru's appeal, but Russia's heady promises never materialized. Neutralism seemed to be withering. Death came to one of the world's most extraordinary and beloved women. Eleanor Roosevelt made the role of First Lady a dynamic one as she walked with the great and the humble. She spent her later years as an avid worker for peace through the UN and was beloved by children visiting the family estate. An international humanitarian, she leaves a legacy of accomplishment. Pope John XXIII made modern church history when he called an ecumenical council of high-ranking prelates to consider reforms and changes in liturgy. The 81-year-old pontiff was stricken during the council, but recovered to take part in ceremonies before recess. Above all, 1962 was a year of spectacular space achievements. Overnight, Colonel John H. Glenn was a national hero when he became the first American to orbit the Earth. The climax of 3 years of effort, his flight spurred new efforts to beat the Russians to the moon. It was a down-to-earth welcome for the colonel as he was greeted by his wife. There were tears of supreme happiness. Heaped honors on Colonel Glenn, whose 80,000-mile odyssey helped the United States blaze a trail to the stars. The U.S. pushed its space program still further ahead when Scott Carpenter followed in Glenn's star-studded footsteps. He brought back more data that scientists termed invaluable. Uncle Sam's most ambitious space flight quickly followed, as Commander Walter M. Schirra made 6 orbits of the Earth. So great was his success that the U.S. prepared to move more quickly into the larger Gemini program, a 2-man capsule, and the Apollo mooncraft. Glenn, Carpenter, and Schirra. History books will record them as the pioneers of '62. A new era in worldwide communications was opened with the orbiting of Telstar, a satellite carrying complex electronic equipment. Once in orbit, Telstar picks up a signal from Earth, magnifies it 10 billion times, and relays it to a receiving station. Pictures that were broadcast from the U.S. to Europe and back had remarkable clarity. Outstanding space achievements in 1962, the United States prepares to push ahead with more ambitious projects. The Gemini is expected to make a space station rendezvous within 2 or 3 years. As the year drew to a close, the Mariner satellite probed Venus 36 million miles away, and work was progressing on Project Rover, a nuclear-powered moon vehicle. A year of crisis and progress, 1962. And hate erupt anew in Dallas as President Kennedy's accused assassin is shot down himself during a jail transfer. There's an ominous symbol in Lee Harvey Oswald's murder weapon as he is taken to the city jail basement where an armored car is to move him to a maximum security cell. Oswald walks his last mile. His assailant moves in from the right.
There is Lee Oswald. He's been shot. He's been shot. Lee Oswald has been shot.
From another camera, the motion is slowed. The murderer moves in, and here is the shame of all America as Jack Rubenstein takes the law unto himself. The dying Oswald is rushed to the same hospital where President Kennedy died. Doctors work to save his life. But 48 hours and 7 minutes after the president's death, his accused slayer is dead. The sound of the muffled drum sweeps in melancholy waves over the hushed throng. A hush broken only by a stifled sob, a murmured prayer. A whole people is lifted up in common sorrow and ennobled in their hearts. Down this avenue of sadness, they bring President John F. Kennedy, martyred hero, to lie in state under the great dome of the Capitol. Mrs. Kennedy begins the long hours of her public grief with the courageous dignity that has marked each moment of her ordeal. Caroline and John seem to mirror their mother's poise. With President Johnson and Robert Kennedy, she is in the van of the mourners who will pay their respects in the historic rotunda of the Capitol. President Johnson represents a sorrowing people as he places a wreath marked "From President Johnson and the Nation."
Mrs. Kennedy comes forward with Caroline in a tableau that calls for no words. Its poignancy calls only for tears. Bearing the burden of their own sorrow, 250,000 people braved near freezing weather to pass by the dead president in tribute. Some waited for as long as 12 hours in a line that at times stretched for 10 miles. The old, the young, the aged, the children. They became one in their grief, in the spontaneous outpouring that throws up an enduring memorial to the American spirit. And so they kept their vigil through the long and lonely night, each man a tiny island of sadness, buffeted by the seas of unhappy fate. The next day, the body is borne to St. Matthew's Cathedral, with Mrs. Kennedy and the President's family walking in humble prayer behind the caisson. Not since the funeral of Britain's King Edward VII in 1910 has there been such a gathering of kings and queens, presidents and premiers. 220 dignitaries from 92 foreign lands honor the warrior who died while fighting for peace and liberty and the dignity of man. Erect and proud, Mrs. Kennedy walks the 6 long blocks with firm step yet tearful eye. At the cathedral, a pontifical funeral mass is to be said for the repose of the soul of the first Roman Catholic president, a devout man from a devout family, who today find deep solace in the solemn rites of their church. As the distinguished mourners gather in St. Matthew's, peoples of all faiths around the world join them in prayers. Mass is read in Moscow, Buddhists pray in South Vietnam, Shinto priests conduct services in Tokyo, a rabbi exhorts God in Israel. The foreign dignitaries move unobtrusively to their pews. They attach little importance to their own identities today. Joining the humble in the 4 corners of the earth, they pray, each in his own way, that the soaring spirit that was President Kennedy in life may find eternal rest in death. The strains of the Ave Maria reach out like a caress. Mrs. Kennedy requested it. The Ave Maria was sung at her wedding. After the sacrifice of the Mass, there are prayers aloud in the tongues of all faiths. Then will come the solemn moment when the incense is tossed on hot coals and Cardinal Cushing, an old family friend, blesses the mortal remains of John F. Kennedy. From St. Matthew's, the cortege is to cross the Potomac to the Cemetery of Heroes, Arlington. As the casket is returned to the caisson, there comes a family vignette that must take its place with those memories we hold warm and dear. A gentle reminder from his mother, and John celebrates his 3rd birthday with a soldier's farewell to his father. No finer epitaph could be extended President Kennedy than his own words from the speech he was to deliver in Dallas the day of his assassination. We in this country, in this generation, are, by destiny rather than choice, the watchmen on the walls of world freedom. We ask that we may exercise our strength with wisdom and restraint, and that we may achieve for our time and for all time that ancient vision of peace on earth, goodwill toward men. That must always be our goal, and the righteousness of our cause must always underlie our strength. The world will remember those words of President Kennedy and his inaugural plea. Ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. Irish Honor Guard with a flourish of arms. And the precious banner that was the President's shroud for 3 days is folded smartly for presentation to Mrs. Kennedy. An eternal flame is lighted before the grave by Mrs. Kennedy, the first such memorial to burn in Arlington Cemetery. She is followed by the President's brothers, Robert and Edward. Thus, the American people have buried their beloved leader. May his family find comfort in knowing they walked with greatness. And may the soul of John Fitzgerald Kennedy rest in peace.
Tinderbox, that is Cyprus, threatens to erupt into a full-scale war. Greek students demonstrate against British and U.S. proposals that a force of NATO troops help maintain a truce on the island until differences between Greeks and Turks can be resolved. They demand that the United Nations take control, as requested by their president, Archbishop Makarios. The Western powers are leery of a UN force, for that would give the Russians a voice. Two bombs were thrown at the U.S. Embassy as terrorists sought to back their demands with violence. One U.S. Marine was injured and damage was extensive. Other bombs were directed at British headquarters, while elsewhere scores of Cypriots were murdered by Greek and Turkish extremists. Since independence in 1960, there has been an uneasy peace. Now the island verges on full-scale war. The United States ordered the evacuation of 1,300 Americans from the island, as Britain, Turkey, Greece, and the U.S. sought some way to smother the flames of violence that might flare into international conflict. There are rumors around that this is Britain's revenge for the Boston Tea Party. 3,000 screaming teenagers are at New York's Kennedy Airport to greet, you guessed it, the Beatles. This rock and roll group has taken over as the kingpins of musical appreciation among the younger element. Some music critics call their harmony unmistakably diatonic. Others say it's pandiatomic. Parents say it's just plain pandemonium. Their first meeting with the American press brings forth an interview laced with quips and humor. You'd laugh, too, with a gross of $17 million last year. New York City cops are hard-pressed protecting the Beatles at their hotel. On every side, there is hero worship that recalls the heydays of Elvis Presley and Frank Sinatra. With one Beatle bedded with a sore throat, 3 of the quartet take an airing in Central Park. There was absolutely no truth to the rumor that the zoo's laughing hyena was driven underground. New Orleans is one big earthquake, or mirthquake of merrymaking, as the entire city turns out for the annual Mardi Gras celebration. This is the last, the all-out uproar that precedes the 40 days of Lent each year, a tradition that belongs to New Orleans. Day and night, the parades pass through the city streets. They have a problem to squeeze in all of the celebrations that mark the days before Lent. From pretty girls, by the score, to grotesque floats, there's something to tickle everyone's fancy. So relax and have your fancy tickled. Was established by the French in 1718, and since its founding has been a city of fun. Birthplace of jazz, good food, and pecan candy, the town became internationally famous when it began to whoop it up on Mardi Gras. The mythical kings and queens of the carnival and their merry crews have a right royal time, all right, way down yonder in New Orleans. picture of four men on their way to a stunning Olympic upset. The Canadian four-man bobsled team on their fourth and final run brings Canada its first Olympic gold medal. The wearers of the maple leaf thunder down the course to win by a fraction of 1 second. Then it's the United States slalom team that mounts a surprise. They were given little chance in the downhill test until Jimmy Huega of California came dancing through the gates. His fast final run assured him of third place. Then the crowd really took notice when Billy Kidd of Stowe, Vermont came flashing down the slope. His performance was so brilliant that he placed third in the combined alpine standing while he takes second place here. And here's the gold medal run of the winner, Joseph Stiegler of Austria. He was pushed by the two Americans to put on a breathless performance. Stiegler almost didn't make the team. It was only public pressure that forced Austria to place him in this event. Kidd, Stiegler, and Huega. The silver and bronze are Uncle Sam's first medals in Olympic alpine skiing competition. Manfred Schnelldorfer of Germany pirouettes his way to the men's figure skating championship. In both compulsory and freestyle, he puts on a performance that had the spectators breathless. Schnelldorfer upset the favorite, Alain Calmat of France, who had quick recoveries from slips to stay in the running. Calmat is the world champion, and some say he went into the games overly confident. All in all, he had 3 slips, and when he was rated in second place, the judges were treated to a round of booing from the crowd. With 1,876 points, he winds up 40 points behind champion Schnelldorfer. Then comes Scott Allen of Smoke Rise, New Jersey, who skates right into the hearts of the crowd as he captures a bronze medal for Uncle Sam. Only 14 years old, Scott puts on a scintillating performance and misses out on second place by less than 3 points. His flashing blades bring renewed prestige to the U.S. Olympic team.
Days of rioting in a Negro section of Los Angeles left behind scenes reminiscent of war-torn cities. More than 100 square blocks were decimated by fire and looters, and few buildings were left intact. Firemen were harassed by snipers and brick-throwing hoodlums as they attempted to control the fires, many of which were left to burn themselves out. As the National Guard moved in to restore comparative calm, the losses by fire alone were put at $200 million. No attempt has yet been made to estimate the losses suffered at the hands of the looters who stole everything from liquor to playpens. Firemen were later issued flak suits of bulletproof mesh to protect them from snipers who continued to shoot from rooftops. Nearly 3,000 were arrested, and authorities had to open abandoned jails to house those netted by the police. It took the appearance of 14,000 troops to bring an end to what both Negro and white leaders called insurrection by hoodlums. Civil rights leaders were quick to deplore the unbridled lawlessness, and Martin Luther King vowed to do all in his power to prevent a recurrence in Los Angeles or anywhere. Uneasy calm prevails in what is known as the Watts area of the city. A curfew was put into effect, and the entire section declared off limits to all but residents. The people who live here are suffering great hardship with no grocery, drug, or other service stores able to operate. A special task force of 1,000 policemen stays on the alert as the thousands of guardsmen patrol an area of 35 square miles. The outbreak spread to other Southern California cities, but were quickly quelled. And Los Angeles authorities say they are now ready to move with dispatch if lawlessness breaks out anew.
riots in Los Angeles have written a sorrowful page in American history. The richest Professional Golfers Association tourney of all time sees Gary Player tee off, first of the big three, seeking $25,000 first money. He's followed by Arnold Palmer, who has never won the PGA. Then this year's top money winner, Jack Nicklaus, shows the powerful drive that brings him a tie for second place. And here is fate's fair-haired boy today, Dave Marr, the ultimate winner. A perennial favorite, Slammin' Sammy Snead, he's to wind up 5 strokes off Dave Marr's pace after a gallant fight. The tournament is not decided until the final hole. Billy Casper is finished with a 282, and the crowd is rooting for Slammin' Sammy, who has a 15-footer and finishes in a blaze of glory with a putt that's worth $5,000. Marr is in trouble, but gets out of a bunker cautiously and then hits a 9-iron to the green. The ball practically freezes just 3 feet from the pin. Marr finished 65th and last in the 1964 PGA, but this putt changes the complexion of things as he wins his first major tournament since 1962. It's a cool and collected Marr who receives all that cold cash. In the golfing world, it was the comeback of the year.